Hello friends, my name is Ambrish Tewari and I welcome you all to UPSC Live. And the discussion that we are going to have today is about the Indo-Pacific strategy. Now, how does it come into news? It comes into news because the USA has recently rolled out a joint maritime exercise with the ASEAN countries. The 10 ASEAN members whose names are as follows, the name of which are as follows. Firstly, there is Brunei, then Cambodia, then Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, and Vietnam. India is not a member state of the ASEAN organization, but it is a supporting organization. Okay, so why are we discussing Indo-Pacific when USA has rolled out a joint maritime exercise? That would be your question. Because it has rolled out it in the disputed South China Sea. Now, South China Sea is not just a bone of contention for China and Philippines. It is also having a broad impact. The China's extravagant muscular power that it is displaying in that region, that is not just limited between it and Philippines. It impacts the entire Indo-Pacific region. And Indo-Pacific region, Indo-Pacific strategy is basically talking about the common platform, the common geographical identification platform that India, USA, Vietnam, okay, that includes India, USA, Vietnam, Brunei, Australia, basically each and every country which either touches or is situated in the Indian Ocean or the Pacific Ocean. That's why Indo-Pacific region. And let me tell you that it is important to create a singular and unified geographical identity based on these two, based on the regional proximity of the countries situated in these two regions, not because some of the largest and some of the most exponentially growing economies are situated in this region, but because the international trade that happens, almost 40 to 50% of that trade, it happens through the region of Indo-Pacific, region of Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean combined together, including the South China Sea. And why South China Sea is going to impact not just the ASEAN members but the entire Indo-Pacific region is it is because if you look at the world map and particularly the Indo-Pacific region, you will come to know that South China Sea plays a middleman or a bridge between the between the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean. Okay? So the international trade and freedom of movement in those waters would become very, very difficult if China and its muscular power, its extravagant show of muscular power, is not reined in by the various countries which have their vested interests in this region, Indo-Pacific. Now, let us focus on the concept first of all. सी द पॉइंट इज कि एक्स्ट्रा जो ये अपना मेरिटाइम एक्सरसाइज है उस पर तो आप सब पढ़ेंगे ही पढ़ेंगे. यू ऑल वुड गो बैक एंड रीड अबाउट इट, read a lot of articles and a lot of videos about it, but can we focus on the bigger picture here? Can we focus on how it is going to impact many big economies, how it is going to impact many big trade routes that lie in this region? This region is no ordinary region because it contains India, it contains China, it contains Vietnam, it contains South Korea, it contains Japan, it contains United States of America, it contains even Australia, one of the most internationally commercialized and industrial nations fall in this region. So this region, any upheaval in this region, any traumatic incident in this region, any turmoil in this region, if left unaddressed, will have a huge impact on the future of global economy and global trade. So let us take a look at the concept. The first time this term was used by the then Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, is Prime Minister even now, but the then Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe on Indian soil in 2007. He used this term to explain a connection between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean due to the regional singularity, regional identity, and the international robust trade that takes place in between them. Because after Atlantic, this is the most frequently used trade route for international trade. About about 10 years from that day, the President of United States in 2017 used this term during his visit to East Asia. He used the term rather Asia Pacific and not Indo-Pacific, because he was trying to make it more larger in the scope, more inclusive in the scope, and not just the ones that are situated in the Indian Ocean, because Asia is so vast that some nations do not even touch Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. So that's why he used the term Asia Pacific. But but it nearly means the same thing, because if you remove because if you calculate or you hover over, you sift through the countries that touch these two oceans, Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, and that belong to Asia, and you take it out of it, I think Asia is left with nothing, because India is gone, China is gone, Japan is gone. These three biggest economies of Asia are gone. So what is left in Asia? Uzbekistan, Tajikistan. I mean, can we just not talk about them here? Because no offense to them, they are also nice countries. But let's talk about what is going to have a bigger impact, and the bigger impact is always of the bigger player. So the bigger player in in Asia, which touches Indian Ocean, Pacific Ocean, are three: China, Japan, and India. Okay. So now the last point of this slide is that it is to goad major economies of the region to develop an open, free, inclusive, robust business platform across the stretches of the Pacific. Okay. So this is the concept of Indo-Pacific. Now, what are the true pronged methods to achieve that object? The object that I have told you just before, the objective to create an open, free, inclusive, and robust business environment across the stretches of Pacific, how is going to be achieved? Firstly, by ensuring the centrality of the ASEAN, that is Association of the Southeast Asian Nations. It is necessary to maintain the centrality, to maintain a voice of these nations in the group of Indo-Pacific countries, because it is necessary to take forward the notion of Indo-Pacific, because Southeast Asian nations are one of the biggest growing powers in the entire world. Be it Singapore, be it Vietnam, be it South Korea, be it Philippines, they are either huge markets or production hubs now. And not just that, but the waters that are used to transport goods to and fro the Indian Ocean and Pacific Ocean is through the Southeast Asian countries, and they have to be kept in mind. Their interests have to be kept in mind if this region is being talked about. Okay. Second is the respect for international laws, especially the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, 1982, which is UNCLOS, at the time of the disputes, particularly over the South China Sea. Now, why all this fuss about the South China Sea? Let me talk about that before I reach the significance of South China Sea slide and explain that. Basically, South China Sea, if you look at its geographical positioning, it forms as a bridge between the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean. That is why it is very, very important that if you have to do a trans-Indo-Pacific trade, it is very, very important that South China Sea remains peaceful and remains turmoil free. Okay. So now let us look at the significance of the South China Sea. One of the mainstay of the Indo-Pacific upsurge would be the assurance of freedom in South China Sea from unnecessary encroachment of China, all because of its location. Told you. Second is that it is very rich in the terms of natural resources, fisheries, oil, gas, all of it, as well as mineral resources. Okay. Now, what UNCLOS does, United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, that international waters में trade कैसे होगा, international waters में mineral resources की खुदाई कैसे होगी, natural resources का exploration कैसे होगा, all of this, the rules for all of this has been formed in United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, UNCLOS 1982, okay, which all of the world, and except China, in fact, all of the world, or the major economies of the Indo-Pacific, leaving China out, they want it to have they want UNCLOS to be the governing law in the South China Sea, while China is saying that it has been its own region historically, which obviously even the arbitration council of the Permanent Court of Arbitration Geneva has denied in 2016. I'll look into it later on. But for now, the second point is that about a $3.5 billion worth of international trade is carried through and fro the South China Sea. As I've already told you, because of its location, it connects Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, and that's why $3.5 billion of trade internationally flows. Sorry. It's not billion, it's trillion. I'm sorry, it's trillion. My notes I had written trillion, it was trillion, but I mistakenly wrote in the slide billion. So it is trillion. $3.5 trillion international trade happens through the South China Sea. Okay. Now, major economies like China, Japan, Korea, west coast of United States of America, they all go through the South China Sea. Hence, it is very, very important. Okay. Not just that, about India's 50% of sea route trade. India's 50% of sea route trade happens and is conducted through the South China Sea itself. Hence, South China Sea holds all the more importance for not just the Indo-Pacific countries around, but India as well. Now, let's talk about India's role in the Indo-Pacific region. But can we just take a detour, and can I just explain you the claims made by China in the South China Sea? So here it goes. The Chinese regime claims that it has historical ownership over nearly the entire region, which gives it the right to manufacture islands, declare defensive perimeters around its artificial islands, and to chase ships from other nations out of the South China Sea. The International Court of Arbitration, that is the Permanent Court of Arbitration in Geneva, rejected the claim in 2016. China considers the dispute in South China Sea as territorial disputes and therefore considers that UNCLOS, which is to govern the international waters, as I've already told you, considers that UNCLOS 1982 does not have a locus standi, does not have a standing in that case. Okay, so China has already disputed this because International Court of Arbitration submitted and based its decision on UNCLOS and not the territorial laws of China, which was a very great step. Philippines had welcomed it. Okay, it was only Philippines that took the case to the International Court of Arbitration or Permanent Court of Arbitration in 2016. But it has been seen recently that it is ready to provide its islands to China, provided China invests in that region. Now we have seen confrontation, and nobody wants to confront the big brother of the region. So what they are doing right now, Philippines was actually the respondent, the claimant, and China was the respondent. So Philippines, even after having won the arbitration, Philippines cannot dare go against the China, because China is a big fish, guys. So what it is doing? That is why ASEAN is now forming linkages with India and Australia and United States and Japan. Because if it has to control China, it has to take all of these four big economies and four big democracies on board. That is why ASEAN, that is why in the current affairs you have seen ASEAN and India coming together, giving each other a huge lot of respects. ASEAN members were the chief guests. All of the 10 ASEAN members were the chief guests in this Republic Day parade. So all of this is being done to create a soft core environment to hold China back, to give a signal to the Republic of China that all of the Indo-Pacific is flocking together and its muscle power will not work in the South China Sea, because it is interesting, because it is of the interest of all of the members of the Indo-Pacific region and not just ASEAN. It is of a substantial usage to India, it is of a substantial usage to Japan, it is of a substantial usage to United States of America, and some usage to the Australia as well. So it is important as to understand this goes a mile high. This goes a mile high in making you all understand as to why ASEAN is coagulating and collaborating with almost all the economies nearby just to maintain a pressure that China is causing turmoil in the region. It must know, China must know that it has its own limits and it cannot go on to show off its muscle power and flex its muscles in the region, which is open for all and which must also be open for all. Now let's talk about India's role in Indo-Pacific region. India has been one of the major players in the region. India conducts many naval exercises with the United States, countries of ASEAN, Japan, Korea, and Vietnam. As I've already told you, it needs no further explanation. In 2015, it was with the United States that India issued a strategic vision for Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean, that is the Indo-Pacific region, in which maintaining the security in the South China Sea was highly mentioned and celebrated, because South China Sea and its and a democratic use of South China Sea is in interest to both the United States and India. So in 2015, this was mentioned in the strategic vision. Third is second is third is this was the third one that I already told you. Uh, Second is oil exploration prospects. ONGC Videsh Limited, which is the foreign um, which is the foreign arm of ONGC India Limited, is prospecting for oil and gas exploration in the exclusive economic zone of Vietnam. India imports 82% of its oil, the thing to be mentioned here, and it needs oil from wherever it can get. Therefore, exploration at South China Sea are very, very important for us. Okay. Now, this is this point, this last point is definitely something which we all have understood by now, that international community, including India and all the nations of importance in this region, they want freedom of navigation, freedom of overflights in the region, and especially the South China Sea. Okay. uh, Thank you so much for your attention. Thank you so much uh, for your lending me your ears, and thank you for your time, and I'll take your leave with a promise to meet you in the next class. Bye bye. Have a good day.